And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a really cool looking game called Patchistory. This is a game where you form history, and in essence, it's a civilization game. But I promise you, it's nothing like you've seen before. This is a game that's getting a lot of buzz. It's from Danko, from Korea, and it's the rules in the game are not the best. I had to go watch a video online to figure out how to play. The translation wasn't the clearest, but once you understand how to play, there's a lot of cool things going on in this game. Let's take a look. Each player is going to get a colored board here at the beginning of the game, and this board is used to keep track of their resources. Over here you have 4 different resources. The yellow one, each turn, that's how much food you're going to get. The blue one keeps track of how many victory points you get each turn. The green one keeps track of how much money you get each turn. And the black one gets minerals each turn. Now food and minerals are cubes, smalls, ones, and larger threes. Victory points and money. The money is actually pretty cool. It's different sized coins, and the victory points are also different sizes, and they go all the way up to 80 denominations. Now, victory points is how you win the game. Over here, you have 3 other things you keep track of. You have your political points, your military, and movement. These don't give you anything each turn, rather they're an intangible number. If you have 2 movement, you can spend 2 movement on a turn. The military keeps track of your current military strength, and the purple one is how many political power you can spend per turn. Each player will start with this area in front of them, and this shows you, for example, that you have 1 of 6 of the different things. There's no minerals, but you have 1 food, 1 money, 1 politics, 1 traffic, 1 military, and 1 culture, which is victory points. There's also another side of the card that you can start with, which is like a staggered setup so that everyone has something different. So this one I have no victory points, and I have no military, but I have 2 food, 2 traffic, 2 economy, and 1 politics. The game takes place in 3 eras. Each era is made up of 5 rounds. Each round is made up of several phases, although there's 2 phases that only happen in the 5th round. At the last part of each phase, the last thing in each phase, is the production. And that's where it matters where you have these things, because you will get victory points, money, food, and minerals based on where these are. Also, if you've used these people here, they're called descendants, you will have to pay a certain amount of food depending on how many you've used. And it actually goes up. It's 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. So the more you have out, the more food you have to pay each turn. Descendants are very important because if you can get a descendant on the board, things will change. For example, this spot here is economy. It gives you 2 coin value, but if you put a descendant on it, you get whatever's in the box. In this case, it's an extra coin. At the beginning of rounds, 4 new tiles are going to be placed out, or 1 for each player, are going to be placed out on the board, and players are going to bid on these tiles. Now the tiles have 2 sides to them. There's a white side and a black side. You will put them out alternating sides. The white sides are always different sorts of resources, while the black sides will have special buildings on them. Sometimes they'll have famous people, like Constantine the Great here. Other times they'll have wonders of the world, like the pyramid here. And what players will be doing, the bidding works like this. If it's my turn, I can bid, say, 1 on the barracks. You have to bid on at least 1. The next person bids 1 on this tile. The 3rd person bids 2 on the barracks. And the 4th person bids 1 on the road here. Now it's my turn. I have some options again. I can add to this bid to increase that. I can move this bid somewhere else. I can move it and increase the bid. But I got to do something. And this will continue until everyone has bid on a different thing. All the money that you've bid goes away, and each person gets these tiles. Now here's the whole point of the game. This is why it's called Patchistory. When you take your tile, and if you don't like your tile, you can chuck it, but you probably want to keep them most of the time, you have to patch it to a tile that's already in play. What that means is I can tuck it underneath it like this, and I would get those 2, or I can put it on top. I can even put it on a corner like that. The only rules that I have to really follow is if there's a big area like this, I can't cover up just part of it. so I have to either cover up the whole thing or not cover it up at all. And once water's on the board, you cannot put anything on top of water. You can't put anything even underneath water. I can't do this. Water is kind of like a spot on the board that's there forever. Not to mention, each era 1, you have a 5x5 maximum grid. So let's say, for example, later on I put this here, and I want to add this. I can't extend here because I'm already 5 across. In era 2, you have a 6x6 grid. In era 3, you have a 7x7 grid. And as time goes by, this grid is going to be changed, and you'll be adding all sorts of things to the grid. You have to keep all the tiles facing in the same direction. And as you put new things out, you are going to find that your stats down here are going to change, and you need to adjust them. And there's lots of spots, like for example, industry here gives me 1 food. I put a guy in it, it will also give me 1 mineral. Special buildings and special people will always give you special abilities. For example, this one here gives you 5 victory points when the first era ends. And, I'm sorry, you lose 5 points when the first era ends. You lose 5 points when the second era ends. But at the end of the game, you'll get 40 victory points. Each player has a shield that they will keep all their resources behind, so people don't know how much money and victory points that you have. After everyone has auctioned for tiles and patched those tiles to their setup, then diplomacy round happens in turn order, and each person can spend a certain amount of political points. You can offer resources to someone else. If they accept, you give them the resources and you get 5 points. If they refuse, you don't give them resources and you only get 2 points. You can threaten someone for points or money if you have more military power than them. And if you have an alliance with someone, you can break that alliance. Then there are other actions that you can take in the management part of the game. And again, all this costs political points. You can trade, send someone out into a trade route. You can exchange your money for food, for minerals. You can give birth, which basically means you get to put a new descendant. You can put one out anywhere onto your patched area. You can worship, which gives you points for your heroes or points for your wonders of the world. You can take votes for your political power, and you'll be keeping these to the end of an era when there's a voting phase. You can build a new trade route. You can also cover up areas on your patched place with these tiles. Each player gets 4 of these at the beginning of the game. It also costs a mineral, or you usually don't want to do that. Rather, you can build little buildings onto spots in the board. So for example, if this is on my board here, I can gladly stick industry there just to get myself the extra food, but that costs minerals and political points. At the beginning of the game, you will have a trade route between you and another player, starting at you and pointing to another player, and then another player will probably have one pointing at you. And you can build new trade routes pointing towards other people. You can send your descendants off on these trade routes. And during the movement phase of the game, where you can move your people up to the number on your movement, and you can move people on your patched area so that they can go to spots where you'd rather use them, but you also move these people on these trade routes. You'll notice that each trade route here gives resources. It might give minerals, it might give food, it might give coins. When it gets to the end of the phase, when you start, you get here, you and the person that you have it at have to decide whether you're going to fight or not. Each person puts out their thumb, and you go at the same time. If you both put your thumbs up, hooray! You've made peace, and you're even allowed to form an alliance, which is a much better trade route, and both players can go back and forth on it. If either person puts their thumb down, a war breaks out. In a war, and you have one turn before the war actually happens, in a war, players are going to compare their military strength. One person's the attacker, the other person's the defender, because there are some tiles, like this one here, where it gives you see the sword gives you 1 military point, the shield gives you a military point, but only when you're on the defense. When the players fight, they'll use their military power, and they'll also basically blind bid a certain number of mineral resources, add that to their power, and whoever has the most wins, and you will get points depending on what era of the game you're in, which could be in the 3rd era, for example, you would get 15 points. Each player is going to get some voting cards at the beginning of the game. Each turn of the game, at the end of the 5th round for each era, you will place these cards. Each person will put one of these cards out there, and you will use these votes. And each person will put any number of votes in their hand and put it above the one that they want to win. Those votes will go on the card. The card with the least number of votes goes away. And then the remaining 3 will get points depending on who's the best. For example, this one gives points for military. So if there's 7 votes on the card, whoever has the most military will get 7 points. Whoever has the second most will get half that, 3 points. The third most will get nothing. And the fourth most loses a point for every 2 votes on the card. So the more votes on the card, the more points the card is worth, but the way it's determined is by whatever resource it shows there. And for example, that one shows military, but there's all sorts of things. Whoever has the most workers, whoever has the most trade routes, whoever has the most food, whoever has the most wonders of the world, etc. And you will do this after each of the 3 eras. After all 3 eras, whoever has the most points is the winner of the game. One last thing before we go, there's 3 eras of the game. Each era has different stacks, and like I said, they all have 2 sides, and you'll see different people and different wonders throughout history. And whether or not you think they're important or not, they did manage to get a smattering of the famous buildings and wonders that are in the world. There's lots of cool things, and all of them have really cool abilities, and so you'll probably want to add them, but at the same time they take up room where resources could be growing in your thing. Some of them take up a whole tile, like Gandhi here, or the Statue of Liberty. So there's all sorts of things. Here's Pope John II, many different special abilities and buildings. So this is a lot of fun as you get these different things, and like I said, each one gives you special abilities. Alright, I already mentioned the rulebook wasn't the greatest, but I'm sure that eventually there would be a very good translation. I mean, it wasn't that hard, but there were several key things I didn't understand as the game went by. The coolest feature of this game, by far, is the patching. That is the most fun part of the game, and really that's the whole basis of the game. There are fiddly parts of the game, moving all 7 of those resource tracks all the time, keeping track of what goes up and goes down, and every turn you're pulling resources and points and money and all those sorts of things. There's a lot going on that you'll get all that, and you know that can be fiddly, and the game is lengthy. I would say that once you know what you're doing, a game will take 2 hours probably, as long as you're really thinking, but your first game might go even closer to 2.5 or 3. Now, I think the game is great in that sense. I mean, I love the historical flavor of the game, the whole patching as you grow areas, the war. I like the war aspect a lot because you can go attack somebody else. It doesn't affect them very much. I mean, if you beat somebody by 7 military or more, then they have to give you 7 points, okay? And no one wants to do that. So you have to keep your military within reason, or someone with a lot of military will make you lose points. But if someone comes and attacks you and you lose, most of the time they will simply get points and you don't. So there's many, many different strategies in this game. You can go for tiles that give you points. You can go for votes so that when we do the things at the end of each era, you can really win those. You can go for military victories. You can go for trade routes. There are a lot of ways to get points in this game, and I think every single game of this will play differently. The bringing out a tile and flipping it to the one side or the other, if you bring out a white tile, the next one's black, etc. That means every game will have very different combinations in it. And sometimes you'll get a great tile and you just simply can't use it in your grid, or it won't fit in your grid. Bidding in this game is one thing some people might have a problem with. It's tough. You know, if you bid someone really high on something, I say 5, you say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you win it with 10, I then have to move my 9 and take a tile I didn't want, and I pay 9 for it. And I think some people will not like that sort of bidding. And in fact, I would like to house rule the game and try it where if you are beaten in the bid, then you can take a smaller amount and put it somewhere else. But for now, you have to take the whole amount and put it on another tile. Resources are cubes, and I wouldn't mind those being updated. All this stuff is really good quality, except the tiles themselves. They're almost paper thin. I understand that it has to be necessary because you have to be able to slide them under or on top, and if they were thick tiles, the thing wouldn't work. But that can be problematic. I think over time that they might get beaten up. Other than that, man, I mean, it's a little convoluted. It's not as clean of a game system as I would like. But I'm going to give them a lot of credit for having some really innovative ideas, and even though it's not going to be the perfect Civilization game, a strong Civilization feel came out to this. The 3 eras felt very different. Political power is a really critical element that you're always going to want, but at the same time, you can win without it by just using the sheer force of resources, and if that doesn't work, then just conquering other people. There's always something that you can do. Rounds go by very quickly. Auctions are important. So is trade routes, war. There's a lot of neat things in this game, and it feels unlike anything else in the market out there right now. So if you have a chance, definitely you want to try this one out. It goes to 4 players. I wish it would have had more, but probably there would have been too much. It would take too long at that point. But for 4 players, what a fantastic game. Patchistory.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.
There.